It is amazing how many times people are working like hard, and they have, when you ask them, what are you trying to accomplish? They're not really sure.
Hi, I'm Karen Hurt, and this is David Dye, and we are delighted to be here with Dan Rockwell, the leadership freak, someone I have known since my very first blog post 3 years ago, and he's really been an incredible mentor for me and guide as I have journeyed through this leadership development process. He's also a leadership coach and works in organizations, and it's just, I'm so delighted to have the opportunity to talk to you about your perspective on what it means to win well. You know, we've had a little bit of opportunity to talk about what we think winning well means in a previous video, but really curious about what winning well means to you.
Yeah, I'm all about the well.
Okay.
If I don't win, but I'm well, I feel okay. I want to win, but I really want to feel well more. You know, this whole sense of satisfaction. And so in me, there is this belligerence that I'm going to do it the way I want to do it. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's like well.
Okay.
Versus, you know, I think the journey of life is so much about learning to define ourselves by who we are rather than what others expect us to be. We start off and you please your parents and you please your teachers and then you please your boss and maybe you please your girlfriend or your boyfriend, then you please your spouse, and you know, you get lost in that process. And then for me, you know, now I'm swinging back around and I should know, you know, what I'm all about, but I'm really relearning what I'm all about. And so that's the well thing, the authentic self, and bringing that to whatever situation I'm in, and trusting that that's useful and helpful to people. So there's this courage to, for me, well is about bringing my best self to each context and trying to be useful to people without losing myself in the whole process.
Yeah. Why do you think it is that we find it so difficult, at least in the United States and across managers and team leaders and so forth, to bring that best self to work and to our teams? And you see people who are great human beings and then they get promoted into management and all the statistics tell us what happens. Why do you think that is? What's the challenge there?
I think it takes courage. And I think the more pressures we feel, the more courage it takes. You know, the further up in an organization you go, the greater the pressures are to kind of be who that person is supposed to be. Mm-hmm. Now, let's face it, we have to align with roles to some degree. Yeah. You know, so there's nothing wrong with that as long as we don't define ourselves by the role. Mm-hmm. And so I think it takes some courage to step into a role and bring yourself there.
Yes.
You know, and like trust yourself. I like to think about it that way, David. You know, the sense of when you, I mean, you're asking me like, how do we describe you? And I don't know. You know, I don't. You know, because it's like only 4 years. You know, well, I guess 5 years now. I've been writing Leadership Freak, and now I stand in front of audiences, and you know, I get this recognition, and it's like, well, I'm still the same person I was before all of this happened. And so there's a sense of self that I want to hang on to and not get lost to that whole thing. So I think courage is part of it. Mm-hmm. I think self-awareness is another part of it, just kind of understanding that, you know, who you are and what you're really good at and what you're really terrible at, and embracing that helps too. That's courageous too, though. So.
Absolutely.
So we've been talking about what a winning well manager is, somebody who's got confidence and humility and results in relationships and balancing all that. And I know you talk to thought leaders all over the world, right? You've talked to leaders at, you know, heads of corporations. Is there anybody that comes to mind that you say, yeah, these are examples, this is an example of somebody who I think has a lot of that going on?
I'll tell you, the thing that changes us most, I think, are these intersections we have with people.
Yeah.
I've been so fortunate to interact with people like you and leaders in business and, you know, really, really smart people. I mean, Marshall Goldsmith, who wrote your foreword to the book, and they change us. Early on, I would be probably 4 years ago now. I had a conversation with Jim Parker, who was the CEO of Southwest Airlines during 9/11.
Wow.
So you can imagine, this is a leader who navigated some of the darkest time in the business world and in our country. Right? They had offices in the Twin Towers. They lost people, and you can imagine. So and so I asked him, Jim, what's the word of advice you like to give people? And what he said to me was rather underwhelming. He said, I love to tell people to be themselves. Now it hit me. I had that conversation with Jim, and when we hung up the phone, I thought, this is something, I'm looking for the Volkswagen bus with the flowers painted on the side and the dope smoking hippie under a tree. I mean, be yourself, right? A few weeks later, I had a conversation with Frances Hesselbein, who said, leadership is a matter of how to be, not how to do. Now, I'm still kind of grasping at that. I'm still trying to figure that out. But I get the idea, the authentic, be who you are leadership thing. And then that conversation was followed finally in a period of 60 days. I had these 3 conversations. And the last conversation I had that kind of closed this in for me on, relationships and results and be who you are was with Harry Kramer, who wrote a book about values to action. And Harry tells this great story about meeting a girl in college and then being invited to meet her dad. And so he flies to Wisconsin during college break, meets her dad, Tom Jansen. Tom says, I have plans for us. He takes Harry Kramer on a 3-day silent retreat. Plans to me are like, we're going to sit in the basement and watch football. Right? And long story short of this whole thing is that Harry Kramer said, it doesn't matter. He was the CEO of Baxter, right? Okay. Huge organization. And he said, it didn't matter where I was in the world, I have never missed that silent retreat. And at that point, I think it was 28 years when I talked to him a few years ago. But it was about reflection. Mm-hmm. So how do we navigate this journey if we want to be ourselves, right? And be leaders who, it's about who we are, not what we do. Leadership is a matter of how to be, not how to do. Then Harry sort of put the cap on that of you got to practice self-reflection. It doesn't have to be a 3-day silent retreat. Right. It could be that day-to-day. For me, it's every morning I'm up early and I spend a couple hours kind of thinking about leadership, thinking about the journey, writing about it, and that's my practice of reflection. So the people, those 3 are so important, and I hate to leave anybody out because there are so many people that I've had. Bill George, and you name them, and I've been so fortunate that they make me better.
Nice. It's fantastic. You get at that combination of confidence in who you are, but humility to recognize your limitations and what you bring to the table, and that other people bring things to the table, and that reflection and self-awareness is so important. And you spend a couple hours on that each day as you're processing and so forth. You have hundreds of thousands of readers all over the world, many of whom are in frontline and mid-level management positions, and who their daily reality sometimes is 10, 11, 12 hours of work a day that's intense. How can they cultivate for themselves some of what you're talking about in their hard-pressed, go reality?
Yeah. Here's a couple of things. The first thing I'm going to say, I think Ken Blanchard is the guy who told me this. Start the day slowly. We get up and boom, we go. So if you have to get up 10 or 15 minutes earlier and kind of start the day a little slower so that it's not like next, just relax, maybe spend some time in gratitude. If you're a religious person, spend some time in prayer or devotion or whatever, but start the day slowly. Here's where I'm at today on this idea of the practice of reflection is try to seize a 2 or 3 minute segment 3 or 4 times a day, where if you could just go in your office or you walk around the building or whatever and just breathe a little bit and disconnect. Don't reflect on some specific thing as much as just learn or practice disconnecting. I'm terrible at this, but I'm practicing it. Right, so it's like every I find a time where it's like I'm in between a meeting or something like that, and and I just want to sit back in the chair and just close my eyes and breathe and just take 2 or 3 minutes. And what I find is doing that, the day no longer feels like it's this gigantic river that I'm being carried through, right? It gives me some breaking points. And I think almost all of us could find 2 or 3 minutes. And even if you are just terrible at doing it, just start practicing it and seizing those, even if it's just breathing, right? And get a little bit of reflection in there. So start slowly and then insert a few moments of reflection through your day to break that day up.
So Dan, when you reflect back on your leadership journey, is there one thing that you say, I have really learned this lesson and I wish I knew then what I know now?
Well, that's that question, that people ask you that question, right? And I always have the same answer. It comes right to my mind. Get over yourself. It's like, I thought it was about me.
Yeah.
I thought it was about what I did. And so I was concentrating all the time on my performance as a leader, And then I thought I had to convince people that I was right, and my vision was what everybody had to embrace, And the problem with realizing that now, and you say, what would you tell your younger self?
Yeah.
I would never have listened.
Very true.
It's right. I said, get out of here.
Right.
I have enough trouble listening today,
Right.
So I think that really is such a huge change, and what that has resulted in for me as a leader is making sure to bring more people in, bring the outside in, bring young people in, gender diversity, bring more people in. It's not about me, it's about them, And boy, I can see that young fella. I started, in the nonprofit world. I was 19 years old. I was public speaking. It's like, and I thought I was all that. And it took me most of my life to realize I wasn't all that. But I still have something to give. You know what I'm saying? You just bring people in, and that, I'll tell you, especially young people, 25 to 35-year-olds. Those are the people who I think are having the biggest impact on my life today. Just bringing in, fresh blood, new eyes, people looking at things differently. And when I am like saying, oh, that doesn't seem right, I just try to keep my mouth shut, and listen for a while, and son of a gun, there's something there.
Nice.
Oh, that's great.
Turning the other direction, that's focused on the individual and your experience and so forth. What advice would you give for a frontline or mid-level manager who has one of those managers in their life who really is a soul-sucking boss, who's not interested in winning well, leading with dignity, or all the rest of it? What do you recommend for those folks?
Yeah, the easy answer is get the heck out, right? But you have your family, you have your responsibilities. Maybe you like your job. It's how it is. The boss is the one who makes a great job terrible. So, a bad boss makes a great job terrible. I think some depends a lot on what that boss is like. But the first thing that comes to my mind, David, is give to others what you wish that boss would give to you. I'm thinking of a guy who's got right in the middle of a very large organization, has lots of responsibility. And he said to me, I just wish, and he's talking now about a corporate leader, I just wish that I would get an attaboy once in a while. So we talked some about giving gratitude, right? And so, and his report is that he goes around the plant now, he's patting people on the back, he's noticing, he's saying thank you so much more, and he says, Dan, it works. So the first thing that comes to mind, I don't know how good it is, but the first thing that comes to mind is give to others what you hope that person would give to you.
It's very much in line with a post that you wrote just recently, I think last week, around the leaders who said, what do you wish somebody would have asked you?
Oh, yeah.
How do you feel?
How do you feel? That was General Dempsey, right? Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Holy, I can still see him. He was in front of the green screen because they were videoing the interviews, right? And, what do you wish you would have been asked? And here's a guy who is hugely responsible. And he doesn't have feelings, right? He can't afford to have feelings. And he says, how do you feel? Yeah, I wish people would have asked, how do you feel? Wow, how courageous is that? Say something like that.
And then the connection you made, if we want people's heart to be connected to the work, we've got to connect to their heart.
Yeah, well said, man.
You said it.
Oh, did I? Gee.
So
In
yes,
300
it
words
was.
or less. All right. Well, good. Is there any other advice you would like to share on this whole concept of winning well?
Well, I talk about the well part because to me that's so important. But obviously the winning side is important too. And you guys are saying it. Define the win, clarify the win. It is amazing how many times people are working like hard, and they have. When you ask them, "What are you trying to accomplish?" They're not really sure. Right? Angry people are like this too. I love, you get an angry person, oh, they're all upset, so they kind of spin around that anger for a while, and then you say, well, what do you want? It's like, I don't know what I want. Boy, if you can help people clarify what they want, see, that's where that winning starts. I think it's so powerful to step back and say, what am I working so hard to achieve?
Fantastic.
Good. Well, we just want to thank you so much. This has been a real pleasure. It's been awesome to finally meet you in person after all these years.
5 years of reading. And meet you in person. Absolute pleasure.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and thank you for the contribution you give to the world in terms of your thought leadership.
Thank you. Thanks.